open up today's session. We've got a lot to cover, so I'll take the opportunity to welcome you all to IACC Shorts, our latest round of short virtual facilitator-led discussions. And I'm delighted to welcome our panel this morning, who I will introduce in a moment. My name's Mark Cooper from IACC. You all, I believe, know me very well. I'm thrilled to join you in this Europe-centric webinar this morning. However, I will say that we have some of our colleagues that are joining us from the US as well. So very early for you in the US, I believe 5 a.m. in the morning. So you are certainly allowed to have coffee in hand, and all grammatical mistakes will be forgiven at this stage of the morning for you all. But first of all, I'd like to introduce this session, which came around 3 weeks ago, a discussion during IACC Europe's board call, where the very pertinent question was asked, of what position should meeting and conference venues take to protect themselves from the effects of a second wave, and in the resulting situation of new restrictions. And that was something that was a question before, I guess, many of our countries and cities started to behave in that way of reinforcing lockdowns. They were not, they were going the other way as opposed to lifting them. So very pertinent then and very pertinent now. But clearly we have moved from a situation of reapplying or adjusting existing contracts that were put in place before March for new and postponed events. And we are now either in the position of talking to clients about brand new events, or we are very close to having those conversations. And we felt that this was a time for us to really start to either plan or put in place some clear strategies for when those days come. And we're possibly in a position now where we're contracting our clients in the face of many more knowns, both from their perspective in terms of knowing they're staging an event during a pandemic, and ours in knowing that we will be servicing those events. And there's a reflection on both sides of what those risks are. So how do we take those into our assumptions that we make when contracting? So over the next 45 minutes, with 15 minutes of Q&A at the end, which I'm looking forward to because we'll get the insights beyond our panel from all of you. We'll be looking at what's the right approach and what is the right balance in terms of contracting to set our businesses up for the recovery that we need and deserve, while still maintaining the flexibility and not throwing up barriers for our clients to return and bring their meetings back to us with confidence. So on that note, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel today. I've asked our panel to both give a short introduction as to who they are, their background, but then also we want them to breed a little bit of optimism into our bones this morning by giving us something that maybe each of them are personally looking forward to in the future in regards to positivity around the meetings and events industry. So Margaretta Welsford, Director of Sales for ETC Venues in the UK and the US of A. Welcome, Marg, and delighted you could join us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see some old faces, or faces that I've known for a long time, I should say, rather than some old faces. So I think a lot of you know me. So I'm Margaretta, Director of Sales for Etc. Venues. We're in London, Birmingham, Manchester, and New York. And we're non-residential, so no bedrooms, and obviously been hit hard in terms of the restrictions that we currently have for meetings and events. Did you want me to say something positive now, Mark?
We're all waiting. We bated breath.
Well, my positive is actually when we're looking at the business on the books and the order books going forward, H2 for 2021, so July onwards, is actually the stronger it's ever been. So interesting, I do think there's quite a lot of demand out there. People are really keen to get back, and a lot of the larger events have then moved. So new events and moved events, incredibly strong order book for the latter half of 2021, which gives me some positivity and some enthusiasm. I do think our industry is going to come back. It's just a really question of surviving and adapting up until then.
Well, that's certainly a positive statement. Thank you, Marg. And Pieter Allaerts, Director of Sales and Marketing for Dolce Hotels and Resorts, coming in, yes, from Europe, but more specifically, Peter, from Brussels and Belgium. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all. So yeah, my name, for those who don't know me, is Pieter. I'm pleased to be part of the global board of IACC. And besides my role at IACC, I am also chairing the European Advisory Council for the association MPI, Meeting Professional International. And as per Mark's introduction, I'm also the Director of Sales and Marketing for Dolce. So yeah, mainly in Europe. So my reason to be optimistic today is very personal for all of us, I believe. Because it's good to talk about contracting, cancellations, the phone is ringing, business is back, business is dropping again, but I think we forget about our own mental health. Certainly we live in very stressful, moments, and our industry is really suffering. But we need to let go what we can't control. And I think at this stage, we can't control the virus yet. So my message to you all is, keep your enthusiasm, keep your optimism. And by the way, Harvard University mentioned that, you live 11 to 15% longer when you are an optimist. So I think that is a good reason to remain optimistic in those challenging times.
11% longer. Well, that'll take us right the way through to dinner time then, if we really adopt that approach. So that's great, Peter. But more specifically, your role within MPI and the Advisory Council provides a really important link, I think, to the expectations and planner perceptions. And when we talk about, what our clients expect from us and what flexibility they need, I'm hoping that you will be able to sit firmly on the fence and give us some views from both sides, as I know Sylvia will be able to as well. But thank you and welcome. Sylvia Nylund, CEO of Svenska Mårten in Sweden. Welcome to you, and we would love to hear a little bit more about you and your positive note.
Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia and I'm the CEO of Svenska Möten, which if you translate it into English is Swedish meetings. We are a member organization at one end, so we are owned by our venues, about 135 conference venues around Sweden, concentrated around the 3 big cities, Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö. So we are one member organization, but at the same time, we are the largest third-party booking agency in Sweden. So we really have both sides during this crisis, talking a lot to our venues and of course, talking a lot to our clients. When it comes to positive thinking, I'm a very optimistic person in general. And even if it has been extremely challenging during these times, everyone that I've been talking to the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, all webinars that I have attended to, everybody's talking about how much everybody's longing to see each other in real life. We are social creatures, we are social animals, and we are meant to be in a flock. So I'm very optimistic as soon as it's possible in terms of regulations, and it's different in different countries. People want to get together and meet. So I'm very optimistic about that. And I can just second Margaret that our books for next year is looking very good in terms of bookings. And I think in Sweden, as you all might know, we have had the least restrictions of all countries in Europe. And we haven't had any formal restrictions for having meetings. But of course, everyone has followed the recommendations from the Public Health Authority to work from home and etc. But we are seeing that it's slowly, even if the business is very low, it has been bookings going on throughout the whole crisis. And now after the summer, it's slowly picking up. Thank you, and out from Stockholm.
Thank you, Sylvia. And again, another important perspective, having never closed your doors, and Denmark as well, very close to you, in a unique position as well, with some positivity that we'll share at points during the session. So we're going to head into the Q&A now. We're going to grill our panelists and get their perspective. Just as a reminder, it is a small group this morning, which is great in the context that use the chat box to talk amongst yourselves as well and share ideas or share perspectives. And I'll keep an eye on that as we go through. I'll take myself off camera for a moment and leave our panelists on, and we'll head straight into the questions. Just before I do, actually, I would like to launch a poll because similar to Margaretta's statement around positivity in terms of where we're seeing current inquiry and booking levels, we always ask this question at an IACC event. It is a moving scale, but we would welcome an idea from you as to when you foresee that your property's business levels are going to reach that magical 50% of normal business levels or more. And certainly Q2 of 2021 is started, well, Q2, Q3. Somebody has confidence in Q4 2020, and that's an interesting and positive statement to make. But very firmly, we're seeing Q2 2021 is where we're breathing as much confidence as we could expect from the current inquiry levels. So let me end that poll now. I think most people have had an opportunity to vote on there. And let's head into the question. So I'm going to begin with Margaretta. So let's begin by exploring the notion of preparing our businesses to have contractual preparedness for a second wave, or let's say for against a backdrop of more major lockdowns, versus dealing with a continuation of the first wave into the future months. Is it different? Is it a different scenario, or are we just continuing our steady state from what we were dealing with in March through to July, Margaretta?
Hi. Well, the challenge is that there's no clarity and no one really knows. So, I mean, I remember leaving County Hall at the end of March and saying to my team, I'll see you in 3 weeks' time. Never would have thought we got back to September. And although we are open at County Hall, you know, obviously business is very slow. I think that the challenge for all of us, irrespective of what country we're in and what business we're in, is that there is no clarity. The government yesterday changed the rules in terms of social events here in the UK. And we've all been working towards a deadline of the 1st of October to open events over 30. That very much sounds like that will be delayed now. So we don't have clarity. I think that what we've done at Etc. Venues is, as I said, survive, adapt and thrive. So whilst we are, you know, we have to work around government restrictions, we've really tried to look at what types of business could there be in the future. So it is about adapting your business. There are sectors in the UK that are doing incredibly well out of the COVID situation. You know, so our teams are looking around construction, education, tech, you know, looking into different sectors. And we're also being very realistic that this will continue, I think, up until April next year in one way, shape or form, whether it's a restriction on numbers in a room, or whether it's a restriction in terms of social distancing, which effectively means that your capacity is at 50%. So to me, it's about adapting. It's about making sure that, you know, what other types of business is there out there that potentially is not meetings and events. We've had a real upshake here in the UK about universities, and a lot of universities now are looking for additional space because they have to social distance. The film industry is really lagging behind because they haven't been able to film. One of my neighbours works for the BBC, and they have no new stuff to come out with. So they have a backlog of filming. So that's a real opportunity for anyone that has space to offer space for filming. Office space, you know, I think you've all seen that we at Etc. Venues have launched a flexible office service. There's a lot of supply in London for offices, but where we as event space can be really adaptable and more flexible than the standard office providers. We've had some real successes where we've said to clients, you can rent a room 1 day a week. You don't have to sign up to a contract for 6 months. We can change your room from an office to a meeting space overnight. The regular office providers can't do that. So for us, I think this is going to continue. You can call it a second wave, you can call it a continuation, but if your meetings demand is not there, and governmentally, for us, it's not, because we can't do meetings for over 30, then we've got to adapt, we've got to change and see what else we can do as, to use our space.
Mark, thank you. And what's clearly coming through there from what you're saying is that you've moved from a position of taking anything that resembles an event to targeting those type of business opportunities that have got resilience as we go through whatever we call the next year or 2 years. Interesting to hear, you know, certainly locking into ideas around the need to remove backlogs around filming and those industries that will need to make commitments and do that against and with knowledge of, you know, the situation and restrictions that are in place. Do any of our other panelists have any views on whether, again, we're changing our mindset from you know, from what we had for the first 5 months to how we look at business development in the future?
Well, I think that all conference venues really have to look over their business model for the future, because the behavior patterns and the demands from different clients are going to be different to some extent. And the changing behavior in terms of some types of digital meetings will stay digital. And the other meetings, when we meet in real life, are probably also going to change in the types of meetings we are going to have. That also puts different requirements on the conference venue.
I also just want to say that, you know, that there is obviously a shift of a lot of people working from home, and a lot of key providers in London releasing space because they don't need the space in London anymore, or reviewing their leases. But rather than seeing this as a negative, I think, you know, that is a positive. We are seeing quite a lot of demand for people who, right, okay, our teams are going to continue to working from home, but therefore we do need to get them together. And we don't have the office space, we don't have the meeting space, or our meeting space is being used as office space. So that, you know, that sort of get-togethers. We've also had quite a lot of inquiries for Christmas events, which really surprised me. But what they're saying there is that they want to recognize their people and what a difficult time it's been. Particularly, we've had this from the NHS and the hospital sector, saying they want to recognize all the great work that the public services have done, but they can't do it in a flashy venue where everyone will see. So they really want a discreet venue where they can go in, say thank you to the teams, but without it being in like a public space like a hotel. I thought that's a real opportunity for some of our dedicated spaces that we have across IACC, where, you know, perhaps you can offer something that a bar or a restaurant just won't, because they want to keep it very closed and very tight.
That's interesting, Margareta. And Sylvia, what we'll get into over the next 30 minutes, and what I'm really keen to drill down to, is when we look at those different event types and any degree of confidence that they will return, whatever the environment we provide, or with acceptance of the environment, how and when do we adjust our approach to flexibility and contracting? At what point do we move from complete flexibility to creating a sound foundation and a business model to reflect those needs for commitments, particularly if the inquiry levels are low? But I'll allow that to be interwoven into each of your sort of statements as we go through the questions. And Sylvia, if I could stay with you. Now, if we look at the process currently that's been adopted in Sweden, we know you didn't close the doors, but as you return, what you told me previously was that you know, events smaller than 50 in Sweden are, you know, are commonplace. What approach do you see you taking in Sweden related to cancellation terms and flexibility? And that question is specifically because previously you had this incredible 4-week standard cancellation term for these smaller groups, where any event could cancel outside of 4 weeks without penalty. That was pre-COVID, and that was a national standard. But I'd like you to talk a little bit about how COVID is affecting that premise and ability to be that flexible, reasons why, and how you're approaching it.
Yes. Of course, it's individual depending on the venue, but I have been talking around to a lot of our members, and in the beginning of the crisis, most of them tried to be extremely flexible to keep the business, of course. But as long as the crisis has been going on, more and more of the venues have realized that they have to kind of pull back and go back to their original terms and conditions, because otherwise they would bleed too much. It's very difficult, for instance, to plan the staffing if you are very flexible and you can cancel or rebook, a few days before. And the 4 weeks that we talked about earlier, I would like to modify that a little bit. We have a standard terms and condition from our industry aid organization. And the 4 weeks is for small meetings and maybe not for overnight meetings. And it's like or different levels depending on the group size. But I think in general that we have shorter terms of cancellation than maybe you have in the UK at least. And now when we talk to our clients, they don't have different demands in terms of conditions, but we have realized that they are very much more aware of the terms and conditions before. Before, a lot of people that were booking the meetings through us, they didn't really know what the terms and conditions were, because they booked the meeting and it was sure that they would go through with it. Now the clients are much more aware of the terms and conditions, but they are not demanding different ones. It's just that they acknowledge them and they are more careful about them, etc.
Sylvia,
and of course,
if I may, just specific to that, because I'm interested, are you saying as well as clients being more aware or evaluating the terms and conditions more closely, are they sensitive to the needs of the venue, the struggles of the hospitality industry and the need for fairness, or are they still are they adopting a self-protectionist sort of mode and being more stringent in terms of their demands?
In general, I would say that they feel with the industry, so to speak. They just want to know so that they are aware of the terms and they can decide accordingly. And of course, they appreciate a lot that if the terms are flexible and they can rebook or cancel. But it's more a question of highlighting so that they are aware of what the rules are. And of course, the rules differ a bit depending on the size of the meeting. But at the moment, we hardly have any meetings over 50 people, so it's mainly small meetings. And then in general, it's around 4 weeks. It can vary. And the venues are not obliged to follow this industry recommendation about terms and conditions, but a lot of them do. So it can differ from venue to venue, and we are very careful about telling our customers when they book a meeting that they really know what the rules are, and that seems to work.
If I may add on that, I fully agree. Contracting is something which is very complex. And, this morning we already spoke about adaptability, about, flexibility probably, but I think knowledge is something we should definitely add as well. It's really important that you and that your team, really knows the contract. That there are common clauses. And I think if you want to negotiate or renegotiate in a position of strength, I think it is very important that you really know your contracts and that you know the legal stuff which is behind, or that you ask support, to get some legal advice, because, force majeure, what is it? Should you always accept a client calling, hey, I would like to cancel and I would like to cancel because of force majeure? I think knowledge of the terms and conditions is key for the future.
Yes, and from both sides, because what we experience when we talk to our clients, they are very understanding. And if we say, well, this venue cannot have shorter cancellation policy, for instance, because they have the rules that comes from the labor market about bringing in people for the staff. And when we explain that, people are very understanding. And in general, I think it's a very good kind of culture or feeling that we're all in the same boat, that we have to help each other, and it's more about question of clarity than we highlight. You know, if you book this meeting, these are the terms, so you are aware when you can cancel, etc. So to have a good communication with the client is very essential.
Can I just add as well? I think you're absolutely right, Sylvia. But well, I'm also amazed that throughout this, the number of venues, hotels, agencies that have just furloughed all of their staff. We've had a number of calls from clients saying, I can't get a hold of anyone. And unbelievable. We kept a team, or have kept a team of 10 working throughout this period. And the key for us has been that we can then talk to our clients, reassure them, help them negotiate, move the business, whatever it's we need to do. But also absolute key to us, and a little bit on Pieter's point as well, has been giving them the authority to negotiate and making sure that they understand what force majeure is and also what flexibility we can do. Because otherwise a client's going to get very frustrated if they're trying to negotiate and every single time the salesperson says, I need to check with our director, I need to check, I need to check. So really having the team in place. You know, I still hear that, oh, I've tried to make a booking, but I can't get a hold of anyone at Hilton. It's unbelievable. You know, there's cost savings, and then there's really endangering your business for the future. But equally, just really having a very, very clear strategy that all of your salespeople who are working understand in terms of T's and C's, in terms of rates, in terms of minimums, so that they can make the decisions and have a good partnership with that client right away.
And I think to Mark's question, at this stage, it's all about self-protection. The client, more and more, they send their terms and conditions to say, we would like to see this integrated in your contracts. And that is just self-protection.
Yeah.
Do we risk being too flexible in the coming weeks and months because of the history of the last 6 months that's behind us?
Well, it was interesting. I don't know, some of you might have, I know Tim was at the Kickstarter event that we hosted around several venues yesterday, but I was at County Hall. And this was a collaboration in the UK of lots of different associations coming together to try and have one voice for the industry. And one of the panelists from an event agency said that, you know, in Europe, you know, he had large events and he didn't have to pay for any cancellations. And but in the UK, people were much more difficult and actually were asking him to pay cancellation charges. So I thought that was interesting. Our stance has been that although we are flexible, you know, we have from this charged cancellation charges from the very onset. Of course, we've been flexible. But, you know, the idea that the venue or the hotel swallows absolutely everything, like Sylvia says, clients do understand. It's great if someone wants to rebook for next year, but we have asked them to pay some form of a cancellation charge. And the reason for that is we said, listen, this is a partnership, and it's great they want to rebook your event, but we need to be realistic. If we're going to survive as an industry, you know, we have strong financial backing, so I think etc. venues will survive, but a lot of venues aren't going to survive, you know, because if you don't have any cash flow coming in, then, you know, if your clients are looking at you as partners, then, you know, they need to pay something to support you. So we've perhaps been a bit tougher than others in terms of asking people to pay cancellation charges if it's not a force majeure. A force majeure is a different thing, but if a client at the moment wants to cancel for November 21, that is not force majeure, that is a cancellation charge.
I think also this can be a golden opportunity if you look forward a little bit, because the debate about terms and condition, it was going on as a very hot topic within Swedish meetings, even before this pandemic. It's one of the topics that's always rise on all our network meetings about how the venues, how you should do it. And from our part, we cannot regulate it in Swedish meetings because that's against the competition laws. But it's a topic among our meetings, and basically it's a question about what business risk you want to take and what standards do we want to have in the industry. And it might be an opportunity to redefine the standards, at least in Sweden, in the post-corona world, so to speak, to take one step back. And because I think in general, both pricing and terms and conditions are the kind of things that the venues compete for having a booking. And in the business model, you also have to build in new costs, because I'm convinced that this new the new hygiene standards are here to stay. So in pricing, you have to look over your business model, so you cover those costs, and maybe terms and condition, and taking the opportunity to make them a bit more, how should I say, endurable, and not being so afraid of, because it's a contract. In all our industries, people are used to having a contract. It's nothing, but this industry has a history that you go back and forth with, and dealing and wheeling, so to speak, a lot. So maybe it might be an opportunity for the future to take a more stand on contracts as a more sound.
Sylvia, I agree that a contract is a contract. On the other hand, I also think that a lost customer is a lost customer. And
yes.
When you lose a customer, it's lost forever. And I don't think that should be the goal, because that's short-term thinking. And I always think, like to your point, customers understand, and I think you can always communicate, talk to them, and find a common agreement. There's resale clauses. If today you get a cancellation for November, you can tell we don't charge if we are able to resell the venue. There's partial charge. Do you stick to the contract and you say we charge 100%, or do you find a middle agreement? You can say you can move the event to next year, but we keep the deposit in order to avoid cash flow issues. Yeah. So I think there's always solutions.
Yes, but what I mean is, of course, you have to be flexible, and you don't want to lose clients. But at the end of the day, you have, as a particular venue, you have to calculate your own business risk. And in the long run, it's also, because this is also, we have a lot of discussion about pricing, and some, some venues are very good in having a very clear idea on what type of conferences they want to have and what target group they are aiming, and they keep the prices high, etc. And they lose some business, but it's business they don't want because it's not profitable. So ultimately, it becomes a question about marketing and sales strategy in terms of pricing and how to keep clients and what type of business you want to have in your venue.
So Sylvia, I think I'm hearing from you, and I would like Pieter's view on this as well. There's a statement that was made to me in advance that cancellation terms and conditions are more important than prices currently. So price is secondary, and probably more so than it has been in the past. Would you agree in broad terms, as an agency, that is the case? I think I heard you alluding to that just now.
Could you just repeat, so I'm sure that I understand you right?
Are the right contractual terms and conditions that we put in place as a venue for our clients at the bid stage more important than the actual pricing and in terms of evaluating a property for suitability?
Yes, I would say that, and also the safety and security standards. We put in a lot of effort now in communicating with our clients what measures are taken at the different at the venues. So it's not so much a question about pricing now. I would say that the safety and security is the top priority, and then pricing, and then terms and conditions.
Thank you. Pieter, from your experience.
I agree. I don't think it's about pricing at this stage, but it's all about flexibility. I mean, it's a given that if we all start dropping our rates, it will create demand. But I don't think that at this stage we should create demand, because I believe that demand is still there. It is just a meeting planner who is not allowed to host it, or is not allowed to travel, and that's why it's not happening. But the demand is not gone, and so we don't really need to create demand. I think we should play flexibility, and yeah, like Sylvia is saying, after the terrorist attacks, it was all about safety. During the economic crisis, it's all about rates, and I think today, it's all about cleanliness and it's all about flexibility.
I totally agree there. So don't drop the prices, because that's not the big problem now.
No, I would agree. I mean, I think the worst thing we can do as an industry is to drop the rates. It's just going to, it will help nobody. It won't help the agencies, it won't help the venues. And we all know that prices are almost impossible to recover. So keep your rates. I think that the key thing is confidence. So confidence in the venues, confidence in the transport system. That's what we need to get back to our clients. I also think, Peter, you're absolutely right that this is a partnership between your clients. And although we want to charge some money and it's making them understand that, it's also a question as to why they're cancelling. Because there's a variety of reasons why people cancel. Is it that they don't think they can get their delegates to the venue? Then, you know, can we do a hybrid meeting? Can we drop the numbers? Can we, if they are the delegates are scared of public transport, you know, can we move the venue then to closer to, you know, wherever they come into? So if they come into Paddington, let's move the event into our Marble Arch property, or we can move it to Birmingham. But a lot of the discussions we had around cancellation, actually, when you start talking to people, it's just that they want lower minimum numbers because they just don't think they're going to get the numbers to the event. And our stance has been, we'll do everything we can to make sure that the event actually runs. And then other things, you know, if the delegates are worried about public transport, well, we've got a bike offering that we've got at our venue. So, you know, so trying to see behind it, because when a client says, I'm cancelling my event, and you immediately go into, well, you have to pay for it, you're entering into the wrong type of partnership. If you start talking and understanding why they're moving, if they do want to move and we can retain the deposit, and I saw that you know, Sweden doesn't have deposits, but in the UK a lot of the larger events will pay deposits, or they can give you another smaller event, then, you know, it's all a bit of a negotiation.
And Margareta, you mentioned at the beginning the need to have a robust sales process in place, and I think you mentioned the word empowering your team to go through a process of looking to several stages before postponement is an option. And you mentioned some of those, you have a hybrid solution as well, but quite clearly it's about empowering and having a plan to try and find those creative alternatives for you and your team at the moment.
Yeah. So we've agreed, and we've given the sales guys a number of different flexible options, whether that be for new bookings, adapted terms and conditions in terms of the cancellation charges and the weeks out, whether it be attrition, whether it be reselling, or, you know, lower minimum numbers. So we have a variety of different documents, and then we've said to the sales team, you can go to this stage, you know, give this away if you get something back from the client. And then anything else, if it's outside of that, then obviously there needs to be a discussion. But that's worked really well. But really making sure that the guys are very clear on what are your operating costs, what is your walk away rate, irrespective of COVID, you know, and what are your parameters around delegate numbers, reselling, attrition, and those types of things. Absolutely paramount. And also, as we said about rates, you know, going into when we hopefully have a higher demand, you know, keeping your rates high for the autumn. If everyone's saying that business is coming back Q2, Q3, then really we need to have a very clear rate strategy for that. And so some clients who perhaps have moved their event from January, from, let's say, April, this year, and want to then contract into November next year, well, there might be a slightly different rate strategy for that. And I don't think we should be scared to say that to our clients, that, you know, but because you're now rebooking into a higher period, then, you know, I might need to ask for higher minimum numbers, because otherwise we'll get into a situation in H2 of next year where there's a great demand, but you've got lots of really low rate bookings that you probably wouldn't have taken in a normal world. I think we have to have confidence ourselves. We're asking our delegates and our clients to have confidence in us, but we need to have confidence in what we do as well, that we do offer a service. It's not just a nice jolly, you know, we are actually really doing something very important when we have these events in our venues.
And we certainly do. We certainly don't want to put ourselves in a position where we change our operating conditions so much that after 2021 and a frustrating year, that it's very difficult to get back to those trading points. Now, this is more, and somebody was trying to speak, so I'll come back. I think it might have been Sylvia. I'll come back to you. More of an observation. If we have applied absolute flexibility in the earlier months with those clients that are now coming back to us to recommit to future meetings, then it's right and proper as part of that sales process to just recognize, you know, we were there for you in March, April and May. We carried that flexibility, we you know, and now we need you to work with us in the future. And hopefully that will, you know, that wasn't easy to do, but hopefully that flexibility will pay dividends and the strength of the relationship that you've got with the client moving forward should allow for some of that appreciation and flexibility that we were talking about earlier. And apologies, Sylvia, I think you may have been trying to talk.
Yes. Monday we had the big gathering with our industry and organization here in Stockholm, and I met a lot of our members and talked to them. And another question that has to do with pricing is that now that there are so many small groups and small meetings, it's more expensive for the venues to run that because they need more staffing having 10 small groups than 2 big groups. So that's another aspect of the pricing discussion, that it's more costly for the venues to have a lot of small group because it needs more staffing and attention than having a few big groups. So just a comment about that a lot of our venues are saying that.
Thank you.
I think if I may add on that, I think, you know, we talked about flexibility, adaptability, knowledge. If I can add another one, I think communication is key as well. And then I mean communication between the sales department and your operational teams. When a client is asking flexibility, you know, and they say that they still would like to cancel 3 days prior arrival, what costs have you already made? And I think that really works well for our venues, is if when you have a good communication with your operational teams, you know, when do they have to order their staff, when they can still cancel their staff, when are we going to suppliers to order the food? So, you know, what is the deadlines? And until one, can the client cancel without us having to make any cost? I think that is a good balance to find as well.
And finding a way to articulate that so there's appreciation of it, because we maybe assume that those are clients who are in very different trading conditions, some good, some bad, you know, they may think it's easier. What I'd like to do now is just take a pause for a moment, just to say to the group, we're getting some nice feedback coming in, lots of support in terms of what you were saying, Peter, in terms of flexibility in a case-by-case basis. Because of the size of the group today, when we go into the Q&A, I'd welcome all of you to come back in, either put a question in the chat box and we'll address the audience the panel, or we'll just open it up, put your videos on, and we can have some general dialogue in the closing 5 to 10 minutes. So, you know, be prepared for that. If your bed's unmade behind you, you might want to make it, or you might not, but we'll just make it a little bit more informal in the Q&A section and welcome everyone to come on screen as well to do that. But Peter, I'm going to ask you a question about what is the right position when it comes to requests to postpone events that are currently taking place outside of any known restrictions, and how far is it acceptable to postpone an event? So somebody who's due to come in October and wants to come back in March, that's pretty straightforward. We understand the reasons for that. But what about somebody who has got a conference with you in March next year and wants to move it to 2022 or even 2023? Are you seeing any level of requests that maybe step outside of the boundaries of acceptability? And if you are, how would you approach those?
You know, Mark, a booking is a booking. I think it's important to, you know, bridge the gap to, you know, what did Paul say, Q2 next year. Let's bridge that gap. But a booking is a booking. And I think, once again, with a good communication to customers, I think you can always find a solution. And maybe you don't charge full now, but, you know, if your customer is coming back in 2021, 2022, or even 2023 is what we're seeing, you know, I would not decline that reservation. An advice I would like to give, however, is, you know, when you have a cancellation, is always to re-sign a new contract, because where it's getting very complicated, and that's what we see happening as well, is that, you know, the client had to cancel in March. said we come back in September, but now suddenly there's still travel restrictions, so we can't come in September. So then you have a cancellation of a cancellation, and it keeps on postponing. And you know, in the end, with your legal terms and conditions, it's becoming very difficult. So if at least each time you sign a new contract, I think once again, even a booking in 2023, more than welcome.
Thank you. Is there any other perspective from Margaret or Sylvia on that? You know, what's an acceptable request? How far and how many times can you move? Or maybe just give us an example of one that was not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already said it is a case-by-case scenario. So, you know, if someone wants to move into a high demand Tuesday in November 21 and their original booking was in August, for example, then, you know, there needs to be a discussion that, yes, I can do that, but what can I get from you? You know, this is negotiation at the end of the day. It's a partnership. So they might have another event, you know. I think also, yes, a booking is a booking, but also, you know, a client will generally have multiple bookings in the background. So, you know, if you're talking to a client about one event, you know, fine, I'll be flexible with this event if you can give me another event in another period. So we've had some events actually move to 2023, some of those larger events. But like I said, in that case, it's been about higher minimum numbers then, so that, you know, you are recontracting. Very good point, Peter, about recontracting, because also it's almost impossible to follow the paper trail otherwise. So recontracting for every cancellation. And that then becomes a negotiation where for new bookings, clients are looking for different terms and conditions that have perhaps a COVID statement. So again, it's a bit of it's starting afresh, because otherwise you get yourself into such a muddle.
Very good point. Thank you, Mark. What I'd like to do now is open up to all, and I see Gail's jumped on camera. Hi, Gail. Nice to see you today. Feel free to come off camera. I'll ask our panel maybe as well to jump in and answer these questions. But interestingly, one of the points that was made to me recently was that evaluating the flexibility when it comes to new events was differing between the event size. And the example that was given is if it's the largest group using the plenary room of the property, that maybe a different approach would be taken to the terms and conditions and flexibilities or concessions offered for that type of event, as opposed to the much smaller groups or the ones which are, I guess, easier to replace at short notice. Is anybody seeing that, taking that sort of approach, or are you being reasonably blanket in terms of the, you know, the terms and conditions?
We've always had different terms and conditions for different sizes of events, and that hasn't changed. We have been more flexible in them, so we've amended them or given the sales team the opportunity to amend them should the client need to. But there's always going to be a different cancellation charge for an event over 300 than what it is for someone for 10.
Any other differing thoughts or experiences from our audience or from our panelists on that question of taking a different approach to the largest group versus the smaller groups?
No, we do in Brussels. I mean, we do the same. We do the same. So depending on, again, it's in communication. It is, like I said in the beginning, more and more clients send their conditions as well. So it's analyzing those, and it's yeah, a la carte.
And that is a good point, actually, that, like I said, more and more of the clients are coming with their terms and conditions rather than adhering to ours. And that's where you really need to have a very good contact with either a legal department or a financial department, because some of these contracts are 64 pages long. I'm sure you've all seen them. And, you know, the sales team then need to be trained in, what previously happened was the sales team would send that 64-page contract to the finance director and say, is this okay? Now, we don't have time to do that anymore. He certainly doesn't. So we've trained our sales teams that these are the things you need to look out for in the contract. And then you need to highlight the ones that you think might be difficult so that we can actually get through the volume of terms and conditions that we're having to adapt.
And ask your customer if they are anyway negotiable before spending hours and hours with your legal team, you know, to see what can you accept, what can't you accept. By then that the customer says, but actually they're non-negotiable, you know, it's take it or leave it, which is happening as well.
Yeah.
And a question that's coming from Lorraine Lester here, and, you know, to paraphrase it, I guess we're talking about collecting different information, far more varied information to help us make these decisions. When our sales team are working remotely, what vehicles or ways have you put in place to ensure that that information is being shared and is available to the sales teams?
Well, we only have 10 people working in the sales teams, effectively the sales managers, and we have a 10 o'clock call every morning, a Zoom call, and that's where we then share all the ideas, the frustrations, the wins, whatever it might be, and then that's follow up with notes. And we have a shared file. We have a Corona file, which has all of the documentation in there, whether that be proactive calls and lists that we're doing, sales strategies, negotiation factors. And what we've also done, I think one of the key things is that hopefully we can start to bring more people back. And as we unfurlough people or we bring people back into the sales team, that's a real key in terms of retraining them. So we've, the sales team have themselves done a sales training module, which we'll do online before people come back in, because a lot of our teams have been not working for 6 months. They came out of a period where, business was booming. Yeah, turn business away. Don't have to negotiate. Life is good. And all of a sudden, they really need to understand there's a lot of retraining mentally in terms of how you negotiate, how you offer flexibility without losing too much for the business, how to run a hybrid event, what these things happen. So I think retraining your teams as they come back off furlough is absolutely crucial, because the selling environment is completely different.
That's a really good point. And all the way through this, it's been about planning, having a clear strategy, communicating often, and having transparency between our groups who are faced with moving through these various stages, and there'll be more of them. And Mark, you gave lots of great examples there. So hopefully that answered the question for Lorraine there, and maybe through our operating systems and our sales systems, we're going to have to start capturing different data on our clients to be able to make better informed decisions. So we are 4 minutes from the end of today's webinar. Again, we still have some time to address some questions. Use the chat box to see some nice dialogue going between you, which is what this is all about, because well, I know our panelists have all the answers, but I know I don't have. So it's nice to see you sharing those between each other. One of the questions that I think that I have is that you talk specifically about targeting different industries and sectors and maybe even event types. When you look to commercial events versus charitable events versus association events, could you give me any view as to whether they are all equally welcomed, or whether some carry more risk than others, and you may be favour a type of event, over the other?
I'll favour a large event that pays lots of money. I mean, so it's all depending on, the charity sector. Again, it depends. That's a really difficult question, Mark, because obviously, a charity event that has a low budget might slot really nicely in because it's on a Friday evening where I don't have a conference. So I think at this stage, we're not seeing a lot from charities or associations at the moment.
Right.
Like I said, we're seeing more from logistics, pharma, and these return to work events.
Well, that's valuable in its own right, from that perspective. And associations, I think, are still grappling with, as all of them, including ours, as to how far out can we take the risk to bring people back together, because there may only be one event a year. But I am pleased to say we'll be announcing IACC's next live event for March next year in the coming days, so watch out for that in your email. As we come up to the hour, I'd like to take the opportunity now to thank Mark, Sylvia and Peter. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and honest perspectives as to the positions that we should take. This is a meaty topic, to say the least, but I hope for those that have joined and those that have joined the session on demand afterwards, they'll be able to get some valuable insights. So appreciate all that you've given to the IACC community today. We have got a busy September ahead of us with more IACC shorts. We have a IACC members pathway to reopening taking place next week. We have a European get together. And we also, for those of you who are with us in Lisbon, and remember Rhino Man, David Hamer, who was our keynote speaker, we have David joining us, and he'll be looking into mindfulness and well-being next week as well. So 2 webinars next week. Do join. Thank you to all. We will share today's session on our YouTube channel within the next hour, so you can share that with colleagues. Wish you all the best with your contracting, recontracting, and finding the right balance between flexibility and client relationships, and also keeping our business profitable and running in the future. Thank you all. Have a great Thursday. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.